Okay, that's the recording and the transcription started finally. So anything you say will be recorded, but not anything you write in the chat. Today actually is continuing our theme of having less and less information the further and further we go in. So you remember we started off with quite long lectures and quite a lot to get you started, get you bedded in, get a kind of base level. Today I think is the shortest lecture that I have in amongst all of these. And in part, that's because it's about control. Now, you remember this is governance, risk, and compliance. How could you forget? But for many organizations, the C stands just as much for control as it does for compliance. The idea is if we have a set of systems that we've put in place to allow us to be comfortable with our compliance requirements. Oh, seriously? So as well as Teams resetting itself and using a different camera, as you know, I've got 3 monitors here, so I've got the stuff that I'm controlling down there. You guys are up there and what you're seeing's up there. As well as deciding that it was going to have a different camera to look at me, PowerPoint has now decided that monitors have changed. So instead of that one being 2 and that one 3, they've swapped. So while I was talking away, I just suddenly realised you weren't actually seeing the slide. So I'm going to play in PowerPoint, mainly because it was PowerPoint's fault. So we were saying that if we have systems in place that allow us to be comfortable in our compliance issues, systems in place to ensure that our financial systems are compliant with legislation, systems to ensure that our HR policies are compliant with legislation, systems in place to ensure that we recorded all of our chemical spillage, compliance recording requirements. If we've got all those things in place anyway, and we have to do it for legislation, we have to do it to ensure that we comply with legislation, can't we extend that out? Can't we say, okay, well, we've got this in place, we've got these things already installed, we've set up rules that allow us to ensure we're compliant. Maybe we could set up rules to do other things that aren't illegal. So we're not talking about compliance or legislation. Not illegal, but things that might be incorrect. And we've got the opportunity to decide what incorrect means in terms of our organisation. Now, we'll have to be careful who chooses what's incorrect behaviour. So there has to be some sort of mechanism in there for the organisation to decide that. However, once you do, perhaps we can use the same systems to monitor that type of behaviour and ensure that our compliance controls can be extended, our compliance mechanisms can be extended into our control mechanisms. Previously, I've spoken about things like complying with distance selling rules, which says how long you have to return something that you buy online. And you'd have a system in there to ensure that all of the returns comply with that legislation. But maybe you want to give a better service to your customers. Maybe you want to extend that from 14 days to 28 days. You can have another trigger. You can have the compliance trigger, that says, yep, we're okay, we're compliant, but we can have a control trigger that says, not only are we compliant, we're doing better for our customers. We might have compliance in there that talks about our financial compliance, understanding our accounts, understanding where money's going, ensuring that it's not going to the wrong place at the wrong times for the wrong people. And that's all required. What isn't required are simple things like if someone goes to make a transaction, who decides if it's okay? And if you're making a transaction of a tenner, maybe the person doing it is fine to just say that's okay. But if you're making a transaction of £10 million, maybe you want more than one pair of eyes looking at it. So we can set up not just compliance policies, but control policies. And we can use the same systems to monitor any violations that we've set up for our organization. Not only does it allow us to monitor those issues, it allows us to take that information and further expand on it to give us areas where the organization's working well and we want to praise, or the organization isn't working and we want to address the problems. Either way, these controls can help the organization with their day-to-day business. And we have the same sort of headings as we had before. We can have preventative controls, stopping people, stopping things, anything that you don't want staff to do. You cyber guys will know all about that. You non-cyber guys will also know all about that. When the cyber guys make you change your password every 2 weeks, and it has to be 16 characters, and there has to be a capital and a number and a special uh, character. Completely forgetting that actually the only thing that matters for password is length. But access control is an issue for everyone. I come on this morning and for some reason, presumably the same reasons that Teams changed its camera and PowerPoint changed its screens, I come on this morning and couldn't see my email. It had logged me out and made me log back in again. That's not unreasonable. I tend to sit at the same computer. I tend not to log out of my system. So it makes sense for a security policy there to say, yeah, every so often, let's just log you out and make sure that you are actually who you say you are. But that's just an IT access system. What about getting into a building? And many of you out there have cards that allow you to swipe into a building or a specific lab. What about access to systems? Even if you're not in IT, you might have access to systems. If you're in the accounts department, you might get access to the account systems, but not the HR systems, and vice versa. HR staff will get access to the HR systems, but not the accounting systems. You can't watch an American medical drama without them complaining that they can't get access to medicines without beeping a card that never works. But what if you are a doctor or a nurse? Who gets to order procedures or treatments? And I'm absolutely going to give away the fact that I know nothing about this, but I can imagine that, for example, a nurse might be able to say, change that person's bandages, but only a doctor might be able to say, give them this kind of medicine. Wherever that line is, and I don't know where it is, and I come back to who decides where these lines are. Whatever that line is, that can be decided upon. So that if you have a system that records all of these things, it can also record who did them, when, and whether or not they have the rights to do so. Can you give medicine? Can you pay a bill? Can you get access to a lab? All of these things are nothing whatsoever. Well, in the day-to-day running of the business, they are nothing whatsoever to do with compliance. They are only to do with control. Of course, if things go wrong, you give the wrong medicines, something happens to the finance, that may then step into a compliance issue. But in the main, we're just saying, no, this is about the internal organisation and setting up its controls in order to decide what employees can and can't do, what rights they do and don't have. In other words, the right access for the right people at the right time. So you have to decide what it is that people can see and what they can't, where they can go and where they can't, what they can do and what they can't. Often there will be a requirement to have more than one set of eyes on something. Someone tries to do something, it may require to be signed off. If you're a small organisation and you're just setting up, that's incredibly hard to manage. It's doable, but it's tricky. I've mentioned before, when my son was in a judo club, I was the treasurer. And just to go to the cash and carry and buy juice and crisps for after the club, I had to get someone else to also sign off the cheque, even though the cheque was only for about 30 quid. But you might not always have the people in a small organisation to have two sets of eyes on something. In a large organisation, the problem's flipped. Who gets to do it? Which of the people have these rights? Who is the day-to-day and who is the sign-off? And what are the levels? And we looked at that way back a couple of months ago when we looked at things like governance and schemes of delegation. And you'll remember that we looked at documents that said things like, okay, so if you're an employee, you can spend £100, and if you're at this level, you can spend 1,000, and if you're at this level, you can spend 100,000, and anything over 1,000,000, nobody can do unless you get approval from the board. Whatever those levels are, they're not compliance issues, they're control issues, and that's people trying to keep control of their organisation. And the reason you want to do that is because it makes it very easy for people to break the rules if there's no eyes on them. And again, we've spoken about that kind of bad actor before. So having the system in there, having people know that there are potential problems, that every transaction is checked, that everything will be done, helps to ensure good behaviour. Just knowing that something will be found helps with good behaviour. Even if you know that somebody can do something, and it's not unreasonable in an organisation to allow staff some leeway to do things. You don't want staff stopping every 5 minutes and go, oh, can I do this? Can I do that? What you do is you let them get on with their job. But then afterwards, you have detective controls. In other words, you look at everything that's happened and you say, was this okay? And anything that's, excuse me, outside the controls that you set, someone approved an order for £2,000 when they only had access rights up to £1,000, that will then show up. And it gives both comfort for the organisation know that this will happen, but it also means that there is enough flexibility in the system to cope with what's going on. You don't know why somebody spent 2,000 instead of their allowed 1,000. If it was because they just decided they would, that's not a good idea. If it was because a big order had come in and you suddenly need double the amount of raw materials, then that's absolutely fine. Someone's taken a business decision in order to ensure that the business continues. Somebody's checked it afterwards and thought, yeah, that's fine. So it allows that a certain amount of fluidity in how the business works. Because as you can imagine, anything that's just completely restrictive, anything that doesn't allow staff a certain amount of leeway to do their best work, isn't going to give the best outcomes for the organisation. But having those controls in there means that they know that these things will be checked and monitored. The only question then becomes is how they're checked. Do you have an office with a bunch of people sitting there with desk lamps going through every transaction, manually checking that the person who made this order or that order or paid this bill or that bill had the rights to do so? That they go through every transaction to ensure that it stays the right side of what the organisation wants to do? You can if you're a small organisation. Maybe if you're a local news agent, the owner sees every bit of paper and proves every single thing. But if you're a multinational company, that's not going to happen. So at some point, there'll have to be this change from a manual control to an automatic control. You don't want all those people just sitting there double checking people's work. You have to have them somewhere. People's work does need checked. But if you have someone else checking it, actually you're kind of setting yourself up for the same issue as well. How do you know that the thing that they've checked is correct? How do you know that um, taking a bad actor who has decided to pay someone that they know more money than they're supposed to get? So instead of paying somebody the bill of 1,000, they pay somebody the bill. They pay somebody a bill that's 100,000. That sounds like a good deal. There's 99,000 left over to get um, split between the person that paid the bill and the person that got the money. And by the time the organisation notices, those people are on a beach in Barbados. Ah, you say, but we have somebody looking at that. We have manual checks on everything that goes on. Do you? That's nice. The bill's for 1,000 and you pay 100,000, and there are suddenly three people who get instead of two. 33,000 isn't bad. So this is an issue. This isn't anything new. I would, if you're feeling like checking out your Latin this morning, go look up qui custodiet ipsos custodes. Who watches the watchman? You've all seen enough bad TV with um, corrupt cops taking money. Well, the same thing can happen in an organisation. Moving from a manual control to an automatic control takes away a lot of that problem. Not all of it, because the people who set up the automatic controls can also fiddle them. What if they decide, oh, if a login is me, I can do anything I want? Who's going to notice? But it takes away a lot of the issues. People will notice quite quickly if things aren't happening. So automatic controls become very popular, less labour intensive and less able to be obviated. So we can set up automatic controls using the same systems that we set up for compliance. And in the same way as we set up policies for the compliance, we can set up policies for control, and we get to decide um, what our tolerance is in terms of all the processes that happen in an organization. And because they're IT systems, they are essentially free. Once you've set up the system and it's running anyway, adding an extra check often doesn't make an awful lot of change to the system. You can put in as many of these as you want. The computer doesn't get tired, and it will check them all and give a report as required and automatically alert whoever needs to be alerted and tell them about the things that have happened. So you've got a system that's cheaper because you don't have many people, fewer errors because people make errors. There's no, well, I'm not quite sure about this one. Is it not? No, you've set the limit. So there's no interpretation required. It will happen in real time, all the time, because it's part of the whole system. It's not an add-on, it's not something that someone did. And of course, in terms of governance, to bring us way back to where we started, we have an audit trail of everything that happened. So we can say we have implemented best practice here. Look what we did. We set up the controls. We checked everything. People get alerts when something goes wrong, and so on, and so on, and so on, for all transactions, not just a sample. So hopefully we're not in the position where we go, oh, well, this week we're going to audit one of our 100 shops and hope that it doesn't go wrong. You can monitor everything all the time. And again, as we did before, we can have mitigating controls. In other words, if something goes wrong, what do we do? Ben, you know you're off mute. I don't know what you're doing. Sounds like you're having a bath, but yeah, so we put in mitigating controls. We can say, here's a control that we've set up. Here's a policy. We know that we've violated it because something has happened. If that does go wrong, here's what we do. Here we can say in advance what our response will be to any specific violation. And again, that helps in terms of our governance. We haven't just said, oh, something's gone wrong, let's fix it. We've thought ahead and said, okay, well, if something like this happens, what would we need to do? And again, it shows that type of organization who are taking these things seriously. So I told you it was a very short lecture today, the shortest of our course. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. In terms of how you approach it, in terms of how you get that into reports, you might want to have a wee look at that tutorial there. That might be a way of thinking about it in terms of your case study. Okay, well, if no one has any questions, I am going to stop The recording.